Billionaire father watches as black waitress allows his disabled son to lead a dance step, forever changing her life. The silence in Kingsley's most exclusive restaurant was palpable, so thick it seemed to weigh down the room. Conversation stopped, cutlery froze, and dozens of eyes focused on the small space between the tables. 10-year-old Lucas Montgomery, his legs strapped in metal braces, hesitated, then reached out to Diana Johnson, the restaurant's only black waitress. The live piano had just begun a soft melody, and the boy's impulse to ask someone to dance came suddenly. "Sir, control your son." Manager Thornton's voice cut through the stillness. "This is not a dance hall, and our employees are not here to entertain children." Richard Montgomery, a billionaire and owner of Montgomery Investments, swallowed hard. It was his first dinner out with Lucas since the accident that partially paralyzed him 2 years ago. "Lucas, sit down," Richard commanded softly, his voice firm. Diana stood motionless, her gaze shifting between the manager, the billionaire, and the boy whose hand was still in the air. After 5 years of working there, Diana had learned to become invisible to customers like Montgomery. "Mr. Thornton, I'm leaving. My shift is over," Diana said calmly as she removed her apron. But then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled at Lucas and took his hand. "I can't dance in an apron." Richard stood up quickly. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm accepting an invitation, sir," Diana replied, holding his gaze. Before anyone could stop them, Lucas took a hesitant step forward, dragging his foot across the floor, the sound of his metal braces screeching. Diana matched his pace, guiding him without hurry. Richard watched in stunned silence, a memory cell. Late wife, Elizabeth, dancing with Lucas in their living room. "It's not about perfection," she had said. "It's about connection." As Diana followed Lucas's clumsy steps, something shifted in the boy. Fear turned to concentration. Shame turned to pride. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't being helped or corrected. He was leading. The manager's voice broke the moment. "Mr. Montgomery, I can assure you this will never happen again. She will be properly disciplined." Richard remained silent, watching Diana. The entire restaurant waited for his reaction. With a single word, he could end her career. Diana led the boy back to the table after 3 dance steps. "Thank you for asking me to dance," she said formally, as if speaking to an adult. "It was an honor." Before she could leave, Richard stopped her. "Wait." His voice had changed, almost unrecognizable. "What's your full name?" "Diana Johnson, sir." He repeated it as if memorizing it, then handed her a card. "My office, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Diana accepted the card without showing emotion, though her hand trembled slightly. As she walked away, Lucas's voice echoed, "Dad, why did you do that?" Richard watched his son, and for a brief moment, saw not just the child Elizabeth had left in his care, but a human being whose needs he had ignored for 2 years. The dinner continued in awkward silence, with no one noticing the calm determination in Diana's glance before she left. As Diana walked through the mirrored hallways of Montgomery Tower, she felt the weight of curious stares. A black woman being escorted through the executive offices was rare enough to spark speculation. "He had you fired, didn't he?" Winters asked, adjusting her glasses as they waited in a room. "Powerful clients call, and people like you lose their jobs. You know what I mean?" Diana remained composed. "And where exactly would that be?" Before Winters could answer, her phone rang. "He'll see you now." Richard Montgomery's office took up half the floor, offering a view of Manhattan that seemed to belong to him. He stood by the window, gazing out at the city. "Mr. Montgomery," Diana greeted him formally. "Miss Johnson," Richard replied, his face controlled. "Please, have a seat." The silence was deliberate, designed to make her nervous, to get her to speak too much. After a moment, he asked, "Do you have a background?" Diana held his gaze. "Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU, incomplete Master's in Special Education." Richard seemed taken aback. "And you work as a waitress?" "I work 3 jobs," she replied. "The restaurant, a bookstore on weekends, and as a tutor when I can." Richard picked up a folder. "I did some research. You co-founded Freedom Steps, a program for children with disabilities." Diana sat up straight. "Yes, my sister Zoe and I founded it, but it's closing soon due to lack of funding. I didn't come here to ask you for money, Mr. Montgomery." "Then why are you here?" "Because you invited me," Diana replied simply. Richard laughed softly, a hollow sound. "Fair enough." He stood again, restless. "I want you to work for me." Diana blinked. "As a waitress in your house?" As a therapeutic companion for Lucas, Richard's son's name seemed difficult for him to say, and his eyes momentarily shifted to a photo on the table, a smiling woman holding a baby. "I have the best specialists in the country," Richard said, "but what you did yesterday, it was just a dance." "Mr. Montgomery." "It was the first time I've seen him smile since the accident," Richard admitted, his voice strained. "I don't want a dancer for my son. I want someone who can do what you did. Follow, not lead." Diana studied him closely, seeing the lost father beneath his power and control. "I can pay you 5 times what you make now." Diana stood up. "No." Richard looked shocked, unfamiliar. with being turned down. I don't work for people who see only my color or my social class before my competence, she said calmly. And I don't work for people who try to buy emotional solutions. Richard's face flushed. You're turning down an offer that could solve your financial problems out of pride, dignity, Diana corrected. And your son deserves more than someone hired to pretend to care. She walked toward the door but paused. Lucas doesn't need more experts. He needs space to lead his own life. You don't know my son, Richard replied. No, Diana agreed. But I know people like him, people whose physical limitations are nothing compared to the invisible cages we build around them. She placed a card on the table. Freedom Steps. Classes. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 4 p.m. The first class is free. As Diana left, she passed Winters, who had obviously been listening behind the door. He just turned down an offer from Richard Montgomery. Winters whispered, "Are you crazy?" Diana smiled. "Maybe, but I'd rather be crazy than be property." The next day, Diana was at the community center when her sister Zoe ran up to her. "There's a Bentley parked outside," Zoe whispered, "and you won't believe who's inside." Through the window, Diana saw the luxurious car. Lucas was in the back seat, looking anxiously out the window. Richard remained in the driver's seat, his hands on the wheel, as if torn. "Men like him don't come to places like this," Zoe predicted. Diana smiled. "Don't underestimate the power of a determined son." To everyone's surprise, Richard got out of the car, dressed casually, though his privilege still showed. "I told you he'd come," Diana murmured to herself. Zoe stared at her wide-eyed. "What did you do?" Diana didn't answer, but her eyes sparkled with a secret Zoe didn't fully know. In her tiny Bronx apartment, hidden under her bed, Diana kept a notebook filled with years of research, observations, and a plan that had begun with a simple dance invitation. What Richard Montgomery didn't know, what he couldn't imagine in his world of glass towers, was that Diana wasn't just a waitress. She had a mission, and his empire of privilege was about to face its greatest challenge: the truth that some lessons in life can't be bought. They must be lived. Freedom Steps operated out of an old community warehouse. Posters with phrases like "your rhythm," "your rules," and "every move counts" lined the walls. Richard and Lucas entered, observing children with mobility devices practicing movements to a light beat. "It looks chaotic," Richard commented, clearly uncomfortable. "There's structure," Diana replied. "It's just not the one you recognize." She turned to Lucas. "Would you like to join in?" Lucas hesitated, looking at his father. "Go on," Richard urged. "I'll be right here." As Diana guided Lucas toward the group, Zoe approached Richard, offering him a seat. "The first day is always the hardest," she said. "For the parents, not the kids." "This isn't therapy," Richard argued. "I hired the best specialists." "And how's that working for Lucas?" Zoe asked gently. The door opened, and an older woman entered leaning on a cane. "Dr. Elaine Mercer," Zoe whispered, "neuroscientist specializing in brain plasticity. Retired from Harvard." Dr. Mercer greeted the children before turning to Richard. "Mr. Montgomery, you've rejected my research proposal 3 times. Richard frowned. "I thought this was just a community dance class." Diana returned as Lucas explored movements with another child. Freedom Steps is a motor rehabilitation program combining adaptive dance with neuroscientific principles, he explained. "Why are you working as a waitress if you lead a research program?" Richard asked. "Because we don't have funding yet, and because people like you rejected us 3 times. Richard realized. "You were Dr. Mercer's assistant on the proposal's co-author," Dr. Mercer corrected. "Diana's work is groundbreaking." "You knew who I was at the restaurant," Richard said, piecing it together. "From the moment I walked in," Diana confirmed. "When Lucas got up to dance, I saw an opportunity to show, not tell." The door opened, and a group of reporters entered. Richard tensed. "What's this?" "Part 2 of the plan." Diana smiled. Zoe showed him an article titled "Revolutionary Motor Rehabilitation Methodology Shows Promising Results." "We published today," Dr. Mercer explained. "We invited the press. You used my son for a PR stunt," Richard said coldly. Diana led him into a side room where photos of children adorned the walls. One empty frame caught Richard's eye. "What's that?" "Our future," Diana said. "With proper resources, we could reach 500 children a year instead of 50, Richard muttered. "You orchestrated all of this, the dance, the meeting, bringing me here on press day." "I saw an opportunity," Diana replied. 4 months ago, when you cancelled our meeting, I promised I'd find a way." Suddenly, Zoe interrupted. "It's Lucas." They rushed back. Lucas was in the center of the room, surrounded by children, one brace removed, attempting to balance on just one support. The room was silent as he took a shaky but independent step. The children cheered. Camera flashes went off. Richard, usually composed, was now visibly emotional, unshed tears glistening in his eyes. "That's why we created Freedom Steps," Diana said softly. "It's not about perfect steps. It's about first steps on your own." Richard watched his son, not as a problem to be managed, but as a person discovering his own strength. "This could have been done without manipulating me," Richard said. "It could have been," Diana replied. If you had read our proposals or answered our calls 3 times, the reporters noticed Richard's emotional reaction. A murmur spread as Lucas continued practicing his step, oblivious to the tension. Richard Montgomery was cornered. He faced 2 choices: withdraw in anger, preserving his reputation as cold and calculating, or embrace the moment his son had created. Between his power and the freedom his son needed, Richard found himself in unfamiliar territory, where neither his wealth nor influence could dictate the next step. His gaze shifted between Lucas, smiling, and the reporters waiting for his reaction. Humility wasn't something he was used to, but as he saw the transformation on his son's face, something inside him began to break. The orchestra of privilege he was accustomed to played a different tune. Would he continue conducting, or would he learn to follow? A reporter approached. Could you comment on your presence at Freedom Steps today? Is it true your foundation rejected funding this program 3 times? Richard looked at Lucas, still practicing his new step, then, to everyone's surprise, smiled. You know what's hardest for someone in my position? He asked the reporter, but loud enough for everyone to hear. When we're wrong. A stunned silence filled the room. The Montgomery Foundation is pleased to announce a commitment to fully fund Freedom Steps for the next 5 years and build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Mercer and Ms. Johnson. Camera flashes erupted. Zoe gasped. Richard added, on one condition, Ms. Johnson retains complete autonomy over the program and its methodology. No corporate interference. 3 months later, bulldozers cleared the ground for the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. The project wasn't the most luxurious the Montgomery Foundation had funded, but it was the most innovative, with input directly from the children and their families. Diana supervised the construction regularly, but never alone. Lucas visited often, sometimes bringing other children, and, to everyone's surprise, Richard Montgomery showed up too, silently observing the progress. I never thought you'd show up at board meetings, Diana remarked one afternoon. I never thought I'd have to study neuroplasticity at 50. Richard replied, rubbing his tired eyes, surrounded by post-it noted scientific articles. But here we are. Diana looked at him, curious. Is this part of your public penance, or do you really care? Lucas asked to have his second brace removed last week. I know, Diana smiled. His previous therapist said it would be impossible, for at least 2 years, but you fired her, remember? Richard nodded because she was wrong. At the grand opening 6 months later, the contrast with that night in the restaurant couldn't have been more striking. The huge adaptive space was filled with children using various mobility devices, all moving freely. In the center of the room, Lucas, now with only a light brace on his left leg, led a small routine with 3 other children. His movements, though still limited, flowed with the confidence no doctor had predicted. Richard watched from a distance, not interfering. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, Diana said, approaching quietly. No, Richard agreed, but he still needs me to be around. There's a crucial difference. Thank you, Richard said simply. For what exactly? Diana asked. For teaching me to follow. A reporter approached. Mr. Montgomery, how does it feel to see your son's progress? Richard looked at Lucas, now helping a younger girl balance. Proud, not of what he's overcome, but of what he's created for others. And what's been the biggest lesson you've learned? The reporter asked. Richard Montgomery, the man once known only for his financial empire, looked directly into the camera. True leaders aren't those who guide others down the path they believe is right, but those who have the courage to follow when someone shows them a better way. A year later, Freedom Steps expanded to 3 new cities. Diana received the Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award, and her methodology was implemented in hospitals nationwide. Lucas, now using only a light cane on difficult days, enrolled in regular school and became a youth spokesperson for the program, inspiring other children to find their own pace. Richard learned the hardest and most valuable lesson. True power doesn't lie in controlling every move, but in knowing when to step back and let others lead the way. In a world where powerful people rarely change their perspectives, and those without power often remain in the shadows, the story of Richard, Diana, and Lucas reminds us that true transformation happens when we cross the invisible boundaries between us, when a billionaire learns from a waitress, and a father follows his son's footsteps.